The gentleman from New York.
I'm pleased to yield to the gentleman from California, Mr. Rohrabacher, a member of our committee, 4 minutes.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 4 minutes.
I rise in strong support of H.R. 4655, and I'd like to applaud Mr. Gilman, the chairman of the committee, and Mr. Cox for what I consider to be a well-thought-out, both philosophically and practically, plan that will get our country out of a situation in which we are now in jeopardy unless we do something. The only thing coming back to haunt us now is that when the Gulf War was going on, we did not dispatch Saddam Hussein from this planet. We did not finish the job. We should not have gotten involved in that war unless we intended to finish it. Unfortunately, we did not do so, and now we will live with that decision not to finish that job. There is a symmetry to the affairs of state. There can be no peace without freedom, and there can be no prosperity without peace. Our failure in the Gulf War was not, our failure was in not supporting those who opposed Saddam Hussein's tyranny and not to finish the job on Saddam Hussein himself, back when we had the power to determine the course of events in the Persian Gulf. Our willingness not to finish the job, our unwillingness, I should say, to finish the job and to stand for our ideals, which are to support those elements in that area who believed in freedom, or at least some degree of freedom, and were not aggressing upon their neighbors, and were opposed to aggression. That is the decision that haunts us today. Saddam Hussein now has a blood feud with us, and he will murder, if we give him the opportunity to do so, with weapons of mass destruction. He will murder millions of Americans. So, like it or not, America's safety is now tied to events in Iraq and in the Persian Gulf. We cannot turn our backs on that region, or we will risk the death of millions of Americans, not to speak of just those people in the Persian Gulf itself. But it is not too late to get ourselves out of this dilemma by supporting the people in the region and in Iraq itself who oppose Saddam Hussein's aggression and his dictatorship. This resolution is exactly the right formula, and we should have used it long ago. If we would have used it while we were there in the Gulf during the Gulf War, we would not have the problems and the threat to our well-being that we face today. Support democracy, oppose tyranny, oppose aggression and repression. That's what America's policy should be based on. We should strengthen the victims so they can defend themselves. These things are totally consistent with America's philosophy, and it is a pragmatic approach as well. Furthermore, this resolution calls to hold Saddam Hussein himself accountable. The man is a murderer. The man has murdered large numbers of his own people. The man has invaded his neighbors. It is the dictatorship in Iraq, not the people of Iraq, who are the enemies of the United States and threaten our well-being. That is what this resolution is all about. It is not a declaration of war. It is a declaration that we are on the side of the Iraqi people and the other people of that region who believe in freedom to some degree, whatever degree that is, more than what they have today, and oppose aggression. And let us stand up and stand by our ideals, because we did not do that before, and we left the practical planners to say don't eliminate Saddam Hussein, and now we face this threat. Our support for the Mujahideen collapsed the Soviet Union. And yes, there was a price to pay, because after the Soviet Union collapsed, we walked away, and we did not support those elements in the Mujahideen who were somewhat in favor of freedom and Western values. I would ask for 1 more minute.
And be pleased to yield to the gentleman an additional minute.
The gentleman is recognized 1 additional minute.
With those people who oppose this effort, a pro-democracy foreign policy, a pro-freedom foreign policy rather than an isolationist foreign policy, they would have had us stay out of that war in Afghanistan. They would never have had us confronting Soviet aggression in different parts of the world. Would the world be a better place today? No. But our problem, again, was not in supporting the Mujahideen, not supporting those people who opposed Soviet tyranny, but instead not to follow, but our failure was not supporting those people who believed in democracy and following through with them to see that the pro-freedom elements were supported. That's what this resolution is all about, making sure that we support those people in that region, in the Gulf region, and in Iraq itself, who are our natural allies. And let's hold Saddam Hussein accountable rather than putting ourselves in a place where we let the situation go to such a degree that we end up having to kill hundreds of thousands of people in the region, Iraqis, who are not even our enemies. So let's support those people in Iraq who are our friends and in the region who are our friends, and let's push for democracy. Even in Kuwait today, we can be proud that there has been some democratic reform as compared to what the system was before our people were there. So I stand in support of this resolution.
The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The gentleman from California makes a very good point that sometimes we get involved in these battles and we never fight to complete victory. And he argues the case for pursuing it and always winning and take out the dictator that we are opposing. And there is some merit to that argument, but there's also a very good reason why that doesn't happen and won't happen. It's because when you fight a war for non-national security reasons, when it's limited to protecting oil or some other interests, then there's a limitation. There's no wanting to expand it. When you fight a war for national security reasons, you declare the war, the people join, they are willing to support it financially, they volunteer to go into the military, and they fight to win. But we haven't done that since World War II, precisely because we have this namby-pamby foreign policy of being everything to everybody, and we don't even defend our national security adequately enough. The gentleman from California makes a good point also. He's concerned that somebody like Saddam Hussein may attack us with weapons of mass destruction. He is precisely right. I'm concerned about that too. But I would say that our exposure is about 100 times greater because of our policy. Why is it that the terrorists want to go after Americans? Because we're always dropping bombs on people and telling people what to do. Because we are the policemen, we pretend to be the arbitrator of every argument in the world, even those that have existed for 1,000 years. It's a failed, flawed policy. So I would say I have exactly the same concerns, but I think the policy that we follow has generated this problem, and it will continue. Let me just close by talking a little bit about this authorization. It says there are to be authorized appropriations, such sums as may be necessary to reimburse the applicable appropriation funds. And this is what the money is to go for. Defense articles, defense services, military education, and training. Sounds like getting ready for the Bay of Pigs. That's exactly what we did. And then we backed off. We weren't doing it for the right reason. And of course, we have solidified for 40 years the dictatorship in Cuba. So do you think our policy over the last 10 years has actually helped to weaken Saddam Hussein? Every time he comes out of it stronger. And then those who say, well, we should march in, we should all question. Those of us here in the Congress who are so anxious to take out this dictator, they should be willing to march themselves or send their children and send their grandchildren. Is it worth that? No, we wouldn't want to do that. We got to keep our troops safe from harm, but we'll just pay somebody to do it. We'll pay somebody to do it, and we'll make wild promises. Promise the Kurds something. They'll take care of Saddam Hussein. And sure enough, the promises never come through. Yes, I'll yield to the gentleman.
You don't think it's proper for us to offer those people who are struggling for freedoms in Iraq against their dictatorship a helping hand?
I think it would be absolutely proper to do that as long as it came out of your wallet and you didn't extract it from somebody in this country, a taxpayer at the point of a gun, and say, look, bin Laden is a great guy and I want more of your money. That's what you did in the 1980s. That's what we in the Congress did. They went to the taxpayers, they put a gun to their head and say, you pay up because we think bin Laden is a freedom fighter.
Well, then it was just not handled correctly. That was your...
Well, the policy's flawed. The policy is flawed, and I think the conclusions that we have today are logical. I don't think they lack logic. I think that if you decide that we're fighting for our national security reasons, you never stop short of victory. So this would go along with your argument that we stopped too soon in Iraq. But we weren't there for national security reasons. They weren't about to invade us, and they're not about to invade us. The only way we should fear an invasion by these hoodlums is if we incite them to terrorism. We should consider this a very serious piece of legislation. This is a vote for virtual war and giving more power to the president. It has an open-ended appropriation, and if you spend one nickel on it, you're going to take it out of Social Security the way the budget works around here. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Who seeks to yield time? The gentleman
Please
from New York.
yield to the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Hamilton.
I thank the chairman. Mr. Speaker, I have 2 minutes remaining under my time as yielded by the chairman. Let me just make this observation, if I may. I think my friend, the gentleman from Texas, questioned my statement a moment ago in which I said that the bill states the sense of Congress. It does not change U.S. policy. I believe my statement is correct for a couple of reasons. The language in the bill is only sense of Congress language. It doesn't say that the policy is. It says what the policy should be. But more importantly, perhaps, is that we in this body cannot set policy without the approval of the executive branch. The President is the chief foreign policy maker, of course, and it is my understanding that the policy of the United States government is and will remain, after passage of this resolution, a policy of containment. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of the time. The gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, in closing this debate, I want to respond to a few of the points that have been made by other speakers. First, the bill does not make an open-ended financial commitment. It does not authorize an unlimited expenditure of funds. It authorizes such sums as may be necessary, subject to a cap of $97 million. On the contrary, the purpose of the bill is to save money. We had to pass a $1.4 billion supplemental appropriation earlier this year to pay for U.S. military deployments to confront Saddam Hussein. We're going to have to spend that kind of money over and over again unless we try something new, because today Saddam is further than complying with his international commitments than he was 9 months ago. And secondly, this bill does not force the president to do anything that he might deem unwise. Rather, it gives him additional options for defending our national interest in the Persian Gulf region. Accordingly, I urge support for this measure, and I urge my colleagues to vote yes on H.R. 4655, and I yield back the balance of my time.
All time has expired in this bill. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 4655 as amended? So many in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 of those present having voted in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Mr. Speaker,
The gentleman from Texas.
I'd like a recorded vote.
Does the gentleman ask for the yeas and nays?
I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking the vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 5 of Rule 1 in the chair's prior announcement, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed.